I kept the umbrella she gave me the night she left. It sits in the corner of my new apartment, still folded, still clean. I never opened it. I just needed something of hers that she hadn't touched with cruelty yet. That was 8 months ago. And I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened. I was not a perfect father, but I was a present one. And there is a difference that my daughter never learned to see. Her name is Nicole. She is 34 years old. She has her mother's eyes and, as it turned out, someone else's heart entirely. I am 67. My name is Walter. I spent 31 years building a landscaping company from a single truck and a borrowed mower into something that employed 42 people at its peak. I sold it in 2019 for enough money to retire comfortably, put away a solid amount for Nicole, and keep a 2-story house in Raleigh, North Carolina that her mother and I had paid off together before her mother passed. My wife, Carol, died of pancreatic cancer in the spring of 2017. It was fast. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. Nicole was living in Charlotte at the time with a man named Derek, and she came home for the funeral, stayed 2 weeks, cried hard, and then went back to her life. I understood. Grief moves differently in younger people. They have somewhere to run to. I stayed in the house. I kept Carol's garden going. I learned which flowers she had planted and where, and I watered them every morning because it was the only conversation I had left with her. Over the next 2 years, Nicole and Derek broke up. She moved back to Raleigh, and I told her she could stay with me while she got back on her feet. She moved into her old bedroom in March of 2021. I was glad to have the company. The house had been quiet for a long time. For the first several months, it was good. We had dinners together. She helped me sort through some of Carol's things I had not been able to touch. She brought energy back into the rooms. I started sleeping better. I stopped talking to Carol's photograph quite as much. Then she met Marcus. I want to be fair here, because fairness matters to me even now. Marcus was not obviously a bad man when I first met him. He was well-dressed, well-spoken, worked in real estate. He shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, called me Mr. Hartley. Nicole glowed when she introduced him. I had not seen her glow in a long time, but there were small things, small enough that I told myself I was being an overprotective old man. He never arrived when he said he would. He would show up an hour late and Nicole would already have rearranged her evening without being asked. He spoke over her in conversations, not aggressively, just consistently, as if her sentences were suggestions and his were conclusions. He asked me once, very casually, in the kitchen while Nicole was upstairs, how much I had sold the company for. I told him it was a private matter. He smiled and said he was just curious, that he admired entrepreneurial men, that he had some investment ideas he thought I might find interesting. I said I had a financial advisor I trusted. He nodded, still smiling, and went back to his drink. I did not mention it to Nicole. I should have. That is one of the things I've had to sit with. By the summer of 2022, Marcus was spending 4 or 5 nights a week at the house. Not officially moved in, but present in the way that water is present when it seeps under a door. His things appeared on the bathroom shelf. His car was in my driveway most mornings when I came down for coffee. Nicole stopped asking me how I felt about it. She started telling me how things were going to be. That was the shift. It was gradual. And then it was not gradual at all. She told me one evening that Marcus thought the house was being underutilized. That was the word she used. Underutilized. A 67-year-old widower rattling around a paid-off 4-bedroom house was sitting on an asset that could be structured differently. I asked her what she meant by structured differently. She said Marcus had done some research, that if I were to transfer the property into a family trust with her as co-trustee, there would be tax advantages. That it was just smart estate planning. That she was thinking of my future. I told her I already had an estate plan. I told her my attorney had drawn it up years ago and it was thorough. She dropped the subject for about 3 weeks. It came back in a different form. Maybe I should think about downsizing. The yard was a lot to manage. The house had stairs, I wasn't getting any younger. Nicole and Marcus could take over the mortgage. Obviously, there was no mortgage, but they could handle the property taxes and the upkeep, and I could move somewhere more suited to my stage of life. I was 67. I walked 4 miles every morning. I had no mortgage and no health problems beyond a knee that sometimes complained about rain. The suggestion that I needed to be moved along to somewhere more suitable was not about my well-being. I said no, calmly and clearly. Nicole said I was being stubborn, that I was making things harder than they needed to be. I said I was living in my house. What happened next took place over the following 6 months in ways I am still piecing together fully. Nicole became cold. Not cruel yet, just distant. Dinners became shorter. Conversations became shorter. Conversations became transactional. She stopped coming downstairs when I was watching television in the evenings. Marcus, when he was there, moved through the house with an ease that made my skin tighten, like a man already taking measurements. My neighbor, a retired postal worker named Jean, who had known Carol and me for 20 years, mentioned to me one afternoon that he had seen a man in a suit taking photographs of the exterior of my house. I asked him to describe the man. He was not Marcus. He was older, heavy-set, wore a tie. I thanked Jean and went inside and sat at Carol's kitchen table for a long time. I called my attorney the next morning. His name is Phil, and he has handled my affairs since 1998. I told him what was happening. He told me to change nothing, sign nothing, and to start keeping records. He also asked me gently whether I had any documentation about the current living arrangement. Rent agreements, anything in writing. I had nothing in writing. Nicole was my daughter. I had not thought I needed anything in writing. Phil said I should also look at my existing will. I pulled it out that afternoon. I had written it 7 years ago, before Carol got sick. Nicole was the sole beneficiary. The house, the accounts, everything. I sat with that for a while too. I began to pay closer attention. Not snooping. I want to be clear about that. I was not going to anyone's phone or rifling through bags. I was paying attention to what was happening in my own home, which I had every right to do. I noticed that Marcus received calls he always took outside, sometimes walking far down the driveway, sometimes driving away for 20 minutes. I noticed that Nicole had begun making comments in front of Marcus about my memory that were not true. She told him once at dinner that I had forgotten to pay the electric bill twice last month. I had not forgotten anything. I pay bills automatically. I had done so for 15 years. She looked at me while she said it. I looked back at her. She looked away first. I noticed the way Marcus watched me when I talked, like he was calculating something, like he was deciding whether I was an obstacle or just a delay. The night everything ended, we were not at a restaurant. We were at my own dining room table. It was a Sunday in November. Nicole had made pot roast, Carol's recipe, which she had not cooked in years. It felt deliberate in retrospect, like the meal was meant to soften something. Marcus had brought papers. He slid them across the table after dinner while I was still holding my coffee cup. He said it was a property transfer agreement. Simple, straightforward. He had had his own attorney review it. It would make Nicole co-owner of the house, which was only fair given that she'd been living there and contributing to the household. There's language in the document about my right to remain in residence at the discretion of the co-owners. At the discretion of the co-owners. In my house, that I built my life in. That Carol's roses were still growing in the side yard of. At someone else's discretion. I put down my coffee cup. I looked at my daughter. I asked her if this was what she wanted. She did not look at me directly. She looked at the papers. She said it was just practical. She said I should stop being emotional about it. She said Marcus knew what he was talking about when it came to property. I picked up the papers. I looked at them. I set them back down. And then Marcus said something that I have turned over in my mind so many times. Since that it is worn smooth, like a stone in a river. He said, and I am telling you his exact words, Walter, let's be honest. You're at an age where holding on to things stops making sense. The smart move is to let the people who are going to outlive you take the wheel. The people who are going to outlive you. I stood up from the table. I did not yell. I did not throw anything. I am not a man who yells or throws things. I told them both to get out of my house. I told Marcus specifically that I wanted him out that night, and I did not want to see him again. I told Nicole that I needed her to think very carefully about who she had become and who had helped her become that person. Marcus laughed. It was a short laugh, dismissive. He said I was being dramatic. He said I would calm down and see reason. He looked at Nicole and she said quietly that maybe we should all just sleep on it. I said there was nothing to sleep on. Marcus stood up slowly. He was taller than me. He straightened his jacket and looked at me with something that was not quite contempt and not quite pity and was somehow worse than either. He said, "This house is going to belong to Nicole one way or another, Walter. You know that, right?" Nicole did not contradict him. That was the moment, not the papers, not the speeches about practicality, that moment. My daughter sitting at her mother's table and not contradicting the man who had just told her father that he would be disposed of one way or another. I went upstairs. I sat in my bedroom for an hour. I looked at the photograph of Carol on my nightstand, the one from our 25th anniversary, the one where she is laughing at something off camera and her whole face is lit up with it. I said out loud to that photograph, "I know what I have to do." I called Phil the next morning before either of them came downstairs. He picked up on the second ring. I told Phil I was ready to move. I asked him what we needed to do. Phil had been thinking ahead. He already had a framework. We spent 40 minutes on the phone. I took notes in Carol's handwriting notebook that I had found in her desk and never put away. Over the next 3 weeks, I moved with a quietness and a care that I had never applied to anything in my life. Phil connected me with a financial advisor who helped me restructure my accounts. Nothing Nicole had access to, nothing joint, everything separate, clean, moved with documentation. I also contacted a real estate agent Phil trusted, a woman named Diane, and told her I wanted to list the house. I told no one. During those 3 weeks, I was polite at dinner. I answered questions. I commented on the weather. I watched Marcus sit at my table and I watched my daughter look at me with the kind of careful assessment that I recognize now for what it was. And I kept my face neutral and my voice warm, and I gave them nothing. I was a present father. I was also, when it finally mattered, a patient one. Diane listed the house on a Thursday. It sold in 9 days. The market in Raleigh was still favorable and the house was in excellent condition because I had maintained it as Carol would have wanted. The offer was strong. I accepted it without hesitation. The closing was scheduled for a date 5 weeks out. I told Nicole 2 weeks before closing. I did not do it at dinner. I did not give Marcus the opportunity to be in the room. I waited until a Tuesday morning when Marcus had left for work and Nicole came downstairs alone. I was at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee already poured. She sat down. She looked at the coffee and then at me. I told her I had sold the house. The silence that came after that sentence was unlike any silence I had experienced since Carol died. It had a shape to it. Nicole said slowly that I was joking. I told her I was not joking. I told her I was not joking. I told her closing was in 2 weeks and I needed her to make arrangements. I told her I had found her a very fair 1-bedroom apartment across town and I had paid the deposit and the first 3 months of rent so she would have time to get settled. She told me I could not do that. She told me it was her home too. I told her it was my home, my name, my deed, my 31 years. She told me this was unbelievable. She told me I was punishing her. She asked me if I understood what I was doing to her. I looked at my daughter across that table, across 2 cups of coffee, across all the years and all the distance and all the things that had gone unsaid between us, and I told her the truth. I told her I loved her. I told her I had always loved her. I told her that love was not the same thing as surrender, and that I had spent the last year being moved toward a door in my own life and I was not going to walk through it. I told her that the man she had brought into this house had looked me in the eye and told me I would be handled. I told her she had sat there and let him say it. I told her that was the thing I could not get past. Not Marcus. Her. Nicole cried. She told me Marcus had just been frustrated. She told me it had come out wrong. She told me she had not meant for any of it to go that far. I told her I believed that she believed that. I told her that was almost sadder. I moved out 3 days before closing. I had already found a 2-bedroom apartment in Asheville that I had wanted to visit since Carol and I had talked about it years ago, talked about retiring there, walking the mountain trails together on quiet mornings. I had rented it furnished for the first month while I figured out what I actually wanted to bring. I packed Carol's photograph. I packed the umbrella. I packed her handwriting notebook and her garden journals and the kitchen timer shaped like a tomato that she had used every single time she cooked anything. Everything else I either donated or sold. On the day I drove out of Raleigh, I stopped at the cemetery where Carol is buried. I sat on the bench near her stone for a while. I did not say much. I told her about Asheville. I told her the mountains were going to be nice. I told her I thought she would have liked Diane, my real estate agent. That she had her same, no-nonsense way of getting to the point. I told her I was going to be all right. I have been in Asheville for 8 months now. I walk every morning. The trails here do exactly what I thought they would do, which is make me feel like the world is larger than whatever I am worried about. I have a neighbor down the hall, a retired high school principal named Russell, and we have started playing chess on Thursday evenings. He is better than me. I am improving. Nicole has called 4 times. I have let 3 calls go to voicemail and picked up the 4th. She told me she and Marcus had broken up. She told me she was sorry. She sounded like she meant it. I told her I was glad she called. I told her I was doing well. I told her I thought we should take things slowly and that slowly was not the same as never. She said okay. I said okay. That was 6 weeks ago. We have spoken twice more since then. Short calls. Careful ones. The kind of calls where 2 people are rebuilding something from the foundation because the original structure did not hold. I do not know how it will go. I am not certain about very many things anymore, but I know this much. I am 67 years old. I have worked hard. I have loved well. I have buried the person who mattered most to me in this world, and I have continued getting up in the morning anyway. My home is where I decide it is. My life is mine to shape. No one takes that wheel from me. Not one way, not any other.